All right, today we are jumping into one of the most dramatic and, let's be honest, one of the weirdest chapters in the entire Bible, Ezekiel chapter 4. And this isn't just about a prophet delivering a spoken message. Oh no. This is a full-blown piece of performance art with a deadly serious warning attached.
So let's just get right into it. Picture this. You're walking down the street, and you see a man on the ground carefully building a tiny, perfect model of a city out of clay, only to then set up a miniature army and lay siege to his own creation. I mean, that's literally what the people saw the prophet Ezekiel doing. And you'd have to ask the question, what on earth is going on here?
So this first part of the prophecy, which covers verses 1 through 3, is all about God giving Ezekiel these super specific instructions. He's told to create a visual, tangible model of a disaster that's just over the horizon.
Now, when verse 1 mentions a tile, don't think of a bathroom tile. This is talking about a wet clay brick or tablet. You know, the kind they used for writing on in ancient Babylon. So Ezekiel is told to take one and etch a map of Jerusalem right onto it. This little brick became the stage for the whole dramatic performance.
And think about the detail God asked for here. He didn't just say, hey, show them a siege is coming. Not at all. Ezekiel had to build tiny siege ramps. He had to set up a model army camp, and he even had to place little bitty battering rams up against his clay city. This was a complete 3D diorama of total destruction. And then comes this really weird instruction in verse 3. God tells him to take an ordinary iron pan, like a baking griddle, and place it between himself and his model of Jerusalem. It's supposed to be an iron wall. What could that possibly mean? Well, this is the key. That iron pan represented an impenetrable wall. It was a symbol showing that the people's sin had created such a massive barrier between them and God, that his protection was gone, completely withdrawn. The line of communication was cut. And in that moment, for the people of Jerusalem, judgment wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was an absolute certainty.
And this is what really grounds the whole prophecy in reality. Ezekiel does all of this around 593 BC. It's a clear 5-year warning. And then, just like he acted out, in 588 BC, the actual siege begins. And by 586 BC, Jerusalem is completely destroyed. Ezekiel's prophetic performance became a horrifying historical fact.
But building the model city, as intense as that was, it wasn't enough. The prophecy now gets even more personal, even more physically demanding. Ezekiel himself has to become part of the living, breathing sign.
So in verse 5, God tells him to lie on his left side for 390 days straight. 390 days. Each day represented 1 year of sin for the northern kingdom of Israel, all the way back to when they first split off and dove headfirst into idolatry. I mean, can you even imagine the physical and mental toll of that?
And as if that wasn't enough, as soon as he's done with the 390 days, God commands him in verse 6 to just turn over and lie on his right side for another 40 days. These 40 days symbolize the 40 years of the southern kingdom of Judah's unique rebellion.
So why the different sides and why the different amounts of time? Well, the left side, which was often seen as a symbol of disfavor, was for Israel's long history of rebellion. The right side, a place of a little more honor, was for Judah. It showed that God was judging them for their own separate histories of sin. And while Judah's was definitely serious, Israel's was just deeper and had been going on for much longer.
Okay, so the prophecy now shifts from a visual sign to something you can feel in your gut. Ezekiel isn't just showing what the siege will look like, he's about to show everyone what it will taste like.
In verse 9, God gives Ezekiel a recipe. But listen, this is no artisan sourdough loaf. This is a recipe born out of pure desperation. Just look at this mix. You've got 6 different grains and legumes, all just thrown together into one container. This was a symbol of the coming famine, when people would be forced to bake bread with any and every scrap they could possibly find, just trying to survive.
And the portions, they were tiny. Verse 10 spells out a literal starvation diet, just about 8 ounces of this bread and only 2/3 of a quart of water for the entire day. This was a vivid picture of the extreme scarcity that the people in Jerusalem were about to face.
And just when you think this whole thing can't get any more intense, verse 12 delivers maybe the most shocking command in the entire prophecy. Ezekiel is told to cook his bread over a fire fueled by human dung, and to do it in public where everyone can see him.
So the crucial point here wasn't really about the fuel itself, but it was all about what it represented. For a Jewish person, this act was the ultimate symbol of being spiritually unclean, of public humiliation. It was a prophecy that when they were dragged into exile, they would be forced to eat unclean things among foreigners, completely stripped of their identity and holiness.
Now, Ezekiel, who was a priest, he protests this in verse 14. He says, "I've never been defiled in my life." And God actually shows him a moment of mercy and says, okay, you can use cow's dung instead, which was a pretty common fuel back then. But the symbolic point had already been made. It was powerful and unforgettable. God softened the method, but he didn't soften the message of defilement one bit.
So after all of this, the model city, the lying on his side for over a year, the defiled food, what's the ultimate takeaway? What was God trying to communicate through this incredibly elaborate and painful sign?
Well, the whole point is spelled out in verse 16. God says, "I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem." Now that is a powerful metaphor. The staff of bread represents the very foundation of life. Its food, its security, its sustenance. To break it meant total societal collapse. Everything you rely on is about to be shattered.
And this really gets to the core lessons of the entire chapter, doesn't it? We see that God sends clear, sometimes shocking warnings. We see that sin creates that iron wall, that barrier that cuts us off from him. And it shows that while God gives us time to turn around, eventually rebellion has real, tangible, devastating consequences.
The very last verse of the chapter leaves zero room for doubt. The outcome of ignoring this warning? The people would look at each other in absolute horror as they wasted away, all because of their own sin. It's a grim ending, but it's brutally direct.
And that really just leaves us with a final, sobering question. Ezekiel's prophecy was a multisensory, impossible-to-ignore warning sign. And it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, if a message this dramatic, this clear appeared in our world today, would we have the wisdom to actually listen?